Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
The morning my grandson called to tell me how incredible his graduation party had been, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Ashford, a quiet town at the edge of the Cascade Mountains. Frost still clung to the grass in my backyard, and steam drifted from the second cup of coffee warming my hands. The phone rang at 7:30 a.m. That alone caught my attention. 17-year-olds don't usually call their grandfathers that early on a Sunday unless something is wrong, or something is very right. "Grandpa, you should have seen the place," my grandson said, excitement spilling through the phone. The lights, the music, the food, everything was amazing. I set my mug down slowly. "When did this happen?" I asked. There was a pause. "Last Saturday," he said. "Dad didn't tell you?" For a moment I couldn't speak. I told him I must have mixed up the date. I told him I was glad he had such a wonderful night. I told him I loved him. Then I hung up. I walked to the living room window and stood there staring at the mountains until the frost outside had completely melted. My name is Henry Caldwell. I'm 66 years old, retired after 33 years as a structural engineer for the city of Ashford. And until about 8:15 that Sunday morning, I believed I had done a reasonably good job raising my son. If you enjoy thoughtful real-life stories like this, you might consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps more people discover these stories, and I truly appreciate it. Now, let me explain what happened. My son Mark is 41. He works as a logistics manager for a manufacturing company in Seattle, and his wife Rebecca works part-time as a physical therapy assistant. They have 2 children, Lucas, who had just graduated high school, and Emily, who is 15. From the outside, their life looks comfortable. A house in Bellevue, 2 cars in the driveway, smiling photos online from birthdays and vacations. But the reality was something I had spent years quietly ignoring. It began in 2013, when Mark and Rebecca bought their first house. They were short $35,000 for the down payment. I covered it. I told myself I was helping them build stability for the kids. I didn't ask for repayment, and I didn't write anything down. I simply wrote the check. A few years later, Mark's SUV broke down just after they finished renovating their kitchen. Their savings were gone. So I helped again, $14,000, interest-free. He said he would pay it back when things settled down. Things never really did. Then came the other moments. Emily needed braces that insurance didn't fully cover, $4,500. Lucas played competitive baseball, and the travel teams were expensive, nearly $9,000 over several seasons. One winter, a storm flooded their basement, and insurance covered only part of the repairs. Another $7,000. In 2019, I paid for a family vacation to San Diego. Flights, a beach house, activities for the kids. About $12,000. Watching Lucas and Emily run along the shoreline that week remains one of the happiest memories of my life. I don't regret that trip, but I understand it differently now. After my grandson's call that Sunday morning, I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and added everything up. The total came to just over $205,000. And that didn't include the graduation party. That part began in February. Mark called and told me Lucas's graduation was coming up. He talked about how hard the boy had worked. Strong grades, varsity baseball, volunteer work on weekends. He deserves something special, Mark said. Rebecca had found a waterfront venue in Kirkland. It wasn't cheap. The good places run about $30,000, he said carefully. And that's before catering. He didn't ask directly. He didn't have to. 2 days later, I called him back and said I would cover the venue and catering, up to $40,000. But I made 2 things clear. I wanted to be involved in the planning, and I expected to be there. After all, this was my grandson's graduation. Over the next several weeks, invoices started arriving. Venue deposits, catering payments, photography, decorations. Each time Mark sent the bill, I transferred the money. I asked twice about the date. June 21st, he told me. So I booked my flight for the day before. But according to my grandson, the party had actually happened on May 17th, 5 weeks earlier, and no one had told me. I didn't call Mark immediately. At my age, I've learned that anger rarely produces good decisions. Instead, I went for a long walk along the marina and later called my friend Arthur, a man I've known since we worked construction projects together in the early 90s. After listening quietly, he asked one simple question. What are you going to do about it? At the time, I didn't know, but I knew I needed the truth. 3 days later, I called Mark. When he answered, his voice sounded careful. I heard Lucas's graduation party was beautiful, I said. Silence followed. Then the explanations started. First it was confusion about the venue schedule. Then it was stress during planning. Eventually the real reason surfaced. Rebecca had been worried about appearances. Some of her friends were attending, co-workers and people from her social circle, and they knew I had helped Mark financially over the years. She didn't want them realizing the entire graduation party had been paid for by her father-in-law. My presence would make that obvious, so the simplest solution was to hold the party without telling me. I ended the call politely. Then I sat at my kitchen table looking at that legal pad again. For 12 years, every time my son reached the edge of his finances, I stepped in. Every time. And without realizing it, I had taught him something. That the safety net would always be there. 3 weeks passed. I didn't call. I didn't send Emily her usual birthday money. I didn't reply to Mark's messages. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. Then something unexpected happened. Life became quieter, lighter. I cooked dinner when I felt like it. I slept better. I spent 4 days fishing with Arthur at Lake Chelan and didn't check my phone once. For the first time in years, I felt like my life belonged entirely to me. Then Mark called again. Their mortgage was renewing, and the new interest rate meant their payment would increase by nearly $900 a month. He said $30,000 would help them stabilize things. He asked if I could help. Before answering, I asked one question. Did you and Rebecca intentionally hold Lucas's graduation party without telling me? A long silence followed. Yes, he said quietly. I thanked him for being honest. Then I told him no, not out of anger, out of clarity. For 12 years I had removed every financial consequence from their decisions. Every time they stretched beyond what they could afford, I filled the gap. And eventually they stopped seeing the gap at all. They only saw the bridge. I told Mark I loved him. I loved Rebecca. I loved Lucas and Emily more than I could properly say. But the financial arrangement we had lived under for 12 years was over, completely. 2 months later, Lucas called. He was starting college at the University of Washington and asked if I could help him move into his dorm. I drove to Seattle that weekend. We carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs and later had dinner at a small Thai restaurant near campus. Before we parted, he stopped on the sidewalk and looked at me. Grandpa, he said quietly, the party wasn't the same without you. I smiled and put my arm around his shoulders. Tonight mattered more, I told him. And as I drove home later that night, I realized something I had misunderstood for years. For a long time, I believed generosity guaranteed closeness. It doesn't. Money can create comfort. It can create opportunity. But it cannot create respect. And when generosity slowly becomes expectation, it stops being kindness. It becomes entitlement. For 12 years, I thought writing checks was how I stayed connected to my son's life. It took losing a seat at my grandson's celebration to understand something much simpler. If someone truly values you, they make room for you. If they don't, no amount of money will buy that seat at the table. And if stories like this resonate with you, you're always welcome to subscribe and join this channel. There are many more real stories about family, life, and the lessons we only learn with time.